like a ball.
How do you deal with getting out of that social anxiety? You know what I'm saying? Because it's almost like you get comfortable in that warm, in your own, little prison. Does that make sense? Because I know that's a lot of kids now too.
Of course, it makes sense. And I went through that phase very much so. You know, there's nothing wrong with being alone. I think actually it's a problem that so many people nowadays can't be alone. And I don't think you can create anything worthwhile unless you're willing to sit in a room by yourself and think and reflect and read books and take notes, etc. So being alone is a good thing to me. But of course you can take it too far. And what happens, because I've been through that, I remember I once spent, when I was in my early 20s, I was wandering all around Europe. And I lived, if you can believe it, on an island in Greece, in a cave for several weeks. I didn't see any people. And then I came out and I was like really awkward. I didn't know how to be around people because I hadn't been around them for several weeks. So the thing is, you've got to force yourself to socialize because it's a muscle that you will lose, you know? And in my day, when I was smoking pot, which was, we're going back to
Oh,
the
Robert, let's go.
went back to the 70s, I'm afraid.
I saw that picture of you. You're like,
That's when I had long hair.
yeah, man, it's funny.
Rock and roll. You know, back in those days, smoking pot was a social thing. We did it together in a group, and we kind of had our in jokes. And you know, I remember I was in Berkeley at the time. We would do things. We would smoke pot. We would go up to the top of the hill, like a group of us, 10 of us. We'd watch the sunset. We'd be like applauding and cheering as the sun was going down. You know, things like that. So I have very fond memories of social. But getting back to the point is, you need a balance. Everything in life requires a balance. So you need time to be alone, and then you need to not go too deeply into that. And you have to build that in where you're able to socialize when you want to. It's not forced on you, but you're able to go hang out with your friends. In other words, it's dangerous to go down that rabbit hole for too long, I think.
You did say in your book Mastery that it's a romantic view that artists live alone all the time, and that it's important to socialize amongst other artists and other people because that's how you generate different ideas from different people. But you also talk about how Isaac Newton, it wasn't him when there was a plague and he went for 20 months. I remember that part in Mastery, and it was
Yeah.
in those 20 months when he discovered a lot of his mathematical theories. I believe so, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who discovered themselves as writers in prison.
Yeah, Malcolm X became
Malcolm X, to name one.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I wrote that chapter in Mastery about social intelligence because I've been around a lot of artists in my time. And there are a lot of people who are very talented and gifted, who are extremely creative, but they don't know how to interact with people. They don't know how to sell themselves if they have to. They don't know how to show their artwork or charm people with how they talk about their work. And it limits you. So you can be very talented, but if you're really bad at the social aspect, the social game, you're not going to get very far. So there shouldn't be any shame attached to it because the idea, you know, people are automatically going, oh man, that sounds like you have to be wearing a mask, you have to be playing a role, you have to be inauthentic. But I really dislike that idea. You know, to get along with people, you have to play a role, you have to wear a mask, and you have to be good at that. And really successful artists, people and who are also massively creative, learn how to play that game to some extent. So it's a myth that your talent will get you wherever you want. There are plenty of talented people who you've never heard of because they don't know how to interact with people. They're very awkward. So that's why I wrote that chapter.
Yeah, it's almost like that's why the best artists usually are not the most famous artists. You know, it's because you could be like an 80% good artist, and there's 100% quote unquote artist. But if your social intelligence is at 100 and the other one at a 50, you're gonna be more successful
It's
because
true.
you know how to charm people. You know how to, like especially I always tell people that if you wanna as artists read Mastery and Power, both books. You
That's
know?
right. That's a
Because
good idea.
yeah,
That's, you know, because a lot of artists are very bad at the power thing. They think that's something they shouldn't have to do, that they want to keep their hands clean, they want to be pure. There's something impure about being Machiavellian. And there isn't actually, not at all.
why do you think that? Why do people have this? Do you think it's the elites that gives the masses the like a universal guilt for power so that they could keep it, or is it more human?
I think you hit it right there. So when I wrote the book back in I started writing in 1996. I had been working in Hollywood, and I personally had never had a lot of power myself. I was trying to be a screenwriter, and I wasn't successful, and I hated Hollywood. I really disliked all the games people were playing, all the manipulation, all the stupid politics. Everyone would talk about it was about creating a film, but it was really about power.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote the book not from a position of being a powerful person, but actually from being someone who suffered from the games that other powerful people played on me, right? So like I worked for a film director, and I would write whole bits of his screenplay and dialogue that would later get into the film. He wouldn't put my name on it. He wouldn't give me credit. And that ended up being law number 7. Always get other people to do the work, but take the credit, you know? So as an artist, as a writer, as a musician or whatever, you have to be aware that these are the rules of the game. These are how people play it. And you don't have to be evil. I'm not telling you to be evil. You don't have to crush your enemy totally, but you have to have your eyes open and not be an innocent little simpleton. You have to understand that the people who run the art galleries, the people who run the publishing houses, the people who run the record labels are very political. They're very power hungry, and they're going to manipulate you because artists are generally quite naive. So I really wanted to pound that idea in, it's very important.
Yeah, I always tell people that it makes no sense that the people with bad intentions read the books on power, and the people who are good don't read the books on power, and yet they want someone good in power. You know,
Yeah,
like, like I said that the best kind of politicians will be a politician who acts like a politician, but he really is a sheep in wolf's clothing.
yeah.
Once he gets to power, then he switches it up, you know. But
But getting back to the point you made, a lot of people who are in power, they don't like to have the game revealed. They like to keep these a secret. This is how people in power for hundreds of years have operated. They don't want to share it with others. That's why my book was the first really book to do that, because it was kind of like a naughty little secret. People aren't supposed to have this knowledge, right? And I have since been friends with and worked with several rappers who are, quite successful, 50
Drake.
Cent and Drake.
Yeah. I seen heard of
And
that.
they all told me that, nothing had prepared them for the music business, particularly 50, who'd seen so much on the streets of Southside Queens, he was a drug dealer at a young age. He'd seen everything. He'd seen guns and shootouts and gang fights and murder and everything. He said, nothing prepared me for the music business. It was mostly these white guys who ran all the labels, who were just the most incredible sharky people you would ever meet. But they didn't want the rappers to know about the games that were being played. They wanted to control them, And this is how Black artists and musicians have been exploited since the 1920s, since the birth of jazz, Keep it a secret. You're just our little pawn. Well, you be creative. We'll take all the money. We'll run your life for you. And so people like 50 and Drake said the book helped them open their eyes to the games that powerful people play. And there shouldn't be any guilt attached to that. It should be like, we're leveling the playing field here.
Yeah, I remember in your book, I don't there was a quote that said that Machiavelli said that if you read my book or something like that and you don't want people to be suspicious, write a book that talks against my book, something like that.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
yeah. And that's why anytime I see people who put on an air of being innocent and angel in public light, I'm always suspicious of them. Always.
Oh, I'm there with you, man. I believe that. So I have a thing in laws of human nature. I call it the shadow side of people's person, the dark side of everyone. Everybody has a dark side. It's
You got
inevitable.
a dark side, Robert? For real?
Oh, of course I do. So generally, I'm trying to teach you how to look at people and not be deceived by their appearances.
Mhm.
So people who give off a very extreme persona, like they're very macho or, they're very pure and angelic, they're usually hiding the opposite because that's what they've learned since they were a child. They learn that being really aggressive or being really kind of evil, they're not going to have any friends. So they learn to project the opposite. They learn to project, you know, that I'm a saint. And so even like with a macho person, like a President Trump or a Vladimir Putin, I'm always of the opinion, and I study their body language, that they're hiding the opposite. They're hiding deep wells of insecurity and probably, I'm afraid to say, a kind of a feminine side to them that they're very afraid of, right? So people who are overly saintly are often the ones who are the most passive aggressive. That's been my experience, at least. I mean, not to say that there aren't true saints out there, but they're pretty rare.
Yeah, no, they are rare. When you meet them, you could sense it. You know, like it's it's hard. I've met a few of them. I know what you're talking about, but you can only count them with your fingers. You can only count them with your finger. But most people, they're just not integrated, like you said in your book. They're not integrated, and they're afraid that if they show their dark side, people are not gonna like them. But like you said, you want to see people. You want to see you want people to see the contours of your shadow, because that makes you more interesting, more dynamic as a human, and more creative.
Yeah, and more real.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, particularly if you're an artist, you have to use your shadow. You have to bring it out because look, we live in a culture that's very repressed.
Yeah.
So much political correctness and so much virtue signaling going on that people are really kind of oppressed by it. And they're excited, they're attracted to any kind of work that expresses the dark side, that expresses what they feel, but they cannot say because they're too afraid. So I know for myself that my dark side is I have a lot of anger, you know,
I could
a lot
sense
of,
it in your books.
huh?
I could sense it in your books.
Yeah,
In power.
yeah, for sure. There's certain things I don't like. I hate them. I have that, I don't deny it. I
Mhm.
really hate people who pretend to be something that they're not, who pretend to be all into culture, et cetera, when it's really about power, who pretend to be these super liberal guys or women, but they're in fact treat their employees like shit, et cetera. I hate it. And so I use my hatred, I channel it into my books. I don't go out and hit people or hurt people. I channel that energy into the dark energy into my books and make it productive. And I think, when I was talking to 50, what really made his music, his first albums, which I think are his best really,
Yeah.
so great was there was so much real anger and bitterness in there. So many things that he had suffered, and he put it in the music and you can feel it. So don't be afraid of channeling this energy into productive ways, into fighting for a cause, into creating a business that supports what you believe in, or into writing a book or doing a film that expresses the frustration and bitterness that you're feeling inside of you.